Oliver, where the hell have you been? Why didn't you come to my wedding rehearsal? Mom called you 6 times and she's furious. My stepdaughter Amy bursts into the house in a hurry, her voice laced with reproach and confusion. She wore a simple white dress, the hem of which swung slightly with her hurried steps. I barely looked up at her as I continued to focus on taking down the honorary certificates hanging on the hallway wall. Are you really that unconcerned? Mom just left to take my real father back to the motel where he was staying. I noticed Amy's eyes flicker when she mentioned her real father. This detail did not escape me, but I chose to continue the task at hand, carefully packing the certificate into the bubble wrap. Oliver, what the hell are you doing? Amy's voice held a hint of uneasiness. Mom just wiped all those picture frames clean 6 weeks ago. I still ignored her question, and just put the wrapped frames into the already half-filled cardboard box in the kitchen. Amy followed me, watching my every move. As she turned, her skirt arced gracefully through the air, a sight that reminded me of the countless dance performances I had witnessed as a father over the past 20 years. Only now, she was no longer the little girl who danced to please her daddy. Amy quickly realized what was going on and hurried back into the living room. I followed her, clutching the cardboard box, and watched her shocked expression. She finally realized that the decorations that had been hanging on the walls, all of which belonged to me, had disappeared. If she had gone through the closets and garage, she would have realized that all my clothes and tools were gone as well. I walked out the front door and put the cardboard box in the back seat of the car. Amy followed and stood quietly watching me. Her voice was so soft it almost sounded like she was talking to herself with an incredulous tremor. Are you leaving us? Yes, you finally noticed. I've been moving stuff for 4 days, but neither you nor your mom noticed. That in itself says a lot, doesn't it? I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry, Oliver. I've been busy with the wedding for a while now. You'll be there for that, won't you? No, I won't go. I thought my absence from tonight's rehearsal made that clear. But why, Daddy? She unconsciously called me Dad again. Oh, I mean Oliver. Ah, how touching to be called my father again now. You remember you stopped calling me that 3 weeks ago. Amy was stung by my words and subconsciously hugged herself tighter. I looked at her cowering, and my fatherly instinct that I had felt for years came back to me. You'd better go back inside. It's cold out there. I have to call my mom first. You can try, but I'm guessing her cell phone is turned off. I walked back inside and sat down on the couch in the living room. Amy could faintly be heard leaving a voice message for her mom, pleading with her to call her back as soon as possible. Then she too went into the living room and curled up in a soft armchair, her petite frame almost swallowed by it. I waited for her to clear her head and start this inevitable conversation. From the look on her face, she didn't seem to know where to start. It is often said that weddings can make brides extremely self-centered. I never thought my stepdaughter would be like this. But at this moment, I have to admit that the joy of the wedding has completely blinded her to the fact that the most important person around her is slipping away. This realization left me feeling deeply disappointed, but I had no time for sentimentality. I have to move on. I decided to dominate the conversation. Looking at the confused girl in front of me, I took a deep breath and began to tell the story. Amy, I've been in love with you since the first time I saw you, when you were a 2-year-old girl who always got her hands dirty. I still love you now, and depending on how things go, maybe I'll love you forever. I paused for a moment, thinking about how to continue this conversation. In the end, I decided to format everything after the parting letter I had in my pocket. When I met your mom, she had just been abandoned by your real father. We tell you this story all the time. He was an alcoholic who threatened to leave him if he didn't change after your mom found out for the second time that he was with another woman. As a result, he chose to just leave you mother and daughter. I stopped to give Amy a chance to interject, but she just looked at me in silence. Shortly after that, your mom lost her house because she couldn't pay the rent. We met, fell in love, got married, and then moved into this house to live with my 2 sons, Mike and Ryan. Since our old house is gone, I feel it is my duty to help you. I shook my head gently, but that's all beside the point. The point is, I love your mom and I love you. I love you like my own child. In raising you, I never hesitated to take on that responsibility. My voice trembled slightly as I said the last words, which seemed to jog some of Amy's memories. You are indeed my father, the best father. A lot of my friends envy me and can't believe it when I tell them you're just my stepdad. She stopped abruptly and covered her mouth with her hand, shocked by her own words. In a matter of seconds, she realized what had happened to me over the past month. I continued my narrative. I loved your choice of a future husband, and I was the proudest person in the world when you asked me to hold your hand down the aisle at your wedding. I paused again, watching to see if the words began to send ripples through her. I could clearly see that most of the facts were finally beginning to coalesce and take shape in her mind. She averted her gaze again. Yes, Amy, you never took back your invitation for me to hold you on the red carpet, did you? But when your real father reappeared, bang, I was kicked out. In your conversations with your mom, in your minds, I became a thing of the past. You know what? You guys even forgot to check if I went and got the suit I'm wearing tomorrow like your mom asked. I watched as Amy struggled to figure out which of my questions to respond to first. A look of horror crossed her face when she realized she had completely forgotten that she had ever invited me, the only father she had known since she was a child, to hold her hand on her most important day. I thought she would apologize for it and would try to justify herself, but I was wrong. Instead, she chose the most superficial way to excuse everything. Yes, Oliver, I've met my real father. He means more to me than life. You have to understand that. He only reappeared in my life after I found out I was getting married, and it's been an amazing month. He's very generous and buys me anything I look at more than once. He's just, what should I say? The two of us, well, Mom too, just took it for granted that he would hold me down the aisle. I'm sorry, I forgot I'd invited you. It's just that since he's been back, everything's been like a tornado. Yeah, rolls you around, doesn't it? Yeah, that's it. He was simply charming. I was just telling Mom the other day. She stopped suddenly, realizing to whom she was about to say those words. Her face had always been like a shallow pool of water, on which even the slightest breeze could send ripples that would soon be replaced by new emotions. This moment is no exception, and one emotion after another flashes across her face as she realizes how much she's neglected me this past month. I can even see the exact moment she realized her mom was just as bad. In my own home, all I've heard for the past month is Peter did this or Peter said that. I tried to express my anger at all this, but no one noticed. They've both fallen deep into Peter's charm trap. Yes, I see the appeal of him too. I can understand why he's a great salesman, but I didn't fall for him like your mom and you did. When I pointed out that he had broken faith 3 times, you were completely blind to it. The final straw came 4 days ago when I overheard them discussing church seating arrangements and realized I wouldn't be holding Amy down the aisle. Instead of choosing to show up to the wedding expecting to get a seat in the front row, I started packing my stuff. I think it's time to gently prepare Amy for the possible next shock. You do realize he's still a liar and a philanderer, right? You understand he's still the same asshole who abandoned you and your mom 20 years ago, right? When he gets what he wants, he'll leave again. Don't be mean, Dad. Oliver. Yes, I'm sorry I didn't tell you that my real father would be holding me down the aisle. It's my fault, not his. You can be mad at him and say bad things about him, but what proof do you have that he's still a womanizer? I deliberated carefully how to answer this question. I'm afraid of what the next response will be, but I know my 20-year marriage is dead. Have I lost my daughter too? You get what you pay for, as they say. Where's your mom? I don't need to hold my breath for too long. Amy's eyes first left me, then darted back and forth as she pondered the deeper meaning of my question. She's asking herself if I'm purposely connecting the dots between her mom's whereabouts and my belief that her biological father is still a liar. No doubt Amy knew what was coming next. The rest of the conversation between us felt like deciding whether we were going to end this 20-year relationship in the rubble of lies or keep some memories of mutual respect. I need to tell you something, I said calmly. I found condoms in your mom's bag this morning. What? No doubt it's for tonight. I had a ligature before I met your mom, so obviously it wasn't for me. And I know you're on the pill, so it's not for you either. Thankfully, the package hadn't been opened yet, so she probably hadn't had sex with him yet. But buying a whole box 24 hours before he arrived shows her intentions, doesn't it? I could tell by the look on Amy's face that the news didn't surprise her. This can only mean one thing. She was complicit in her mother's betrayal of my marriage vows, tacitly approving of her mother's impending bedding with that smooth-talking asshole. Do you think it's romantic? It's like a fairy tale. Your mom and dad are back together and you get to play the happy family, driving a Porsche from your own father instead of the Nissan I bought you. Amy opened her mouth to respond and I raised my hand to stop her. Don't say it. Forget it. The answer doesn't matter anymore. The fact that you knew but kept quiet and didn't tell me is enough to end our relationship. I stood up and walked over to her, pulling her up and hugging her, repressing all the emotions I had failed to express this day and this month. I spoke my final words to her, Amy, I loved you. With that said, I left her life. Turning back in the doorway, I saw the complete devastation on her face, tears streaming down her cheeks as she swallowed desperately and gasped for air, trying to find her cell phone. I imagined she was desperately hoping that her mother hadn't really betrayed me, that her mother hadn't really crossed that line, that her mother could use it to convince me to forgive her. And hopefully she won't lose her other father, the one who's been screaming for the past month that his wife no longer loves him but has gone completely unnoticed. Meanwhile, her mother is once again enamored of the articulate king of sales, mesmerized by his sweet-talking stories. I shrugged. Whether or not my wife Sarah actually crossed that line, the condom I found this morning was enough for me. Initially, I only planned to move out temporarily to show my displeasure with what had happened over the past month. But this morning's discovery made me realize that I had underestimated the seriousness of the situation. And after a few hours of agonizing thought, I was convinced that moving out was necessary. I jumped in the car and drove off. The night of the wedding rehearsal, I spent some time trying to figure out which motel the suddenly reappearing father was staying at. My motivation was simple. I wanted to witness my wife's betrayal to cool my heart completely and prepare me for what was to come. My efforts were in vain. So I went with Plan B. After leaving Amy, I pulled over to the side of the road not far from home and turned off my lights. Sure enough, less than a minute later, my ex-stepdaughter drove by crying, so focused on her emotions that she wouldn't have noticed even if a herd of elephants had followed her. She drove straight to a specific motel and went straight to a specific room. I followed closely behind with my trusty DSLR and zoom lens. Hearing Amy's cries, her mother opened the door to her room. Oddly enough, it wasn't the sight of Sarah hastily wrapped in her motel robe with her hair in disarray or her ex-husband standing behind her in nothing but his underwear that really bothered me. What blew me away was the look of panic on Sarah's face when Amy opened her mouth to speak. I have protected her from such emotions for the past 20 years, and it seems to have become a habit. I threw my camera on the passenger seat, turned off my cell phone, and drove off into the night. After Amy was ushered into the room and the door closed, my knowledge of what happened next came from a variety of sources. The wedding did take place as scheduled, but instead of the original 10 a.m., it was postponed to 6 p.m. First, they had to find the bride's mother. She had been desperately searching for me all night and finally fell asleep exhausted. Precious time is then wasted searching for the bride's real father, but he has vanished without a trace. Like I told Amy, once he got what he wanted, he left. I'm really curious as to what his motivation is for doing this. My research shows that he and his second wife never had children, so maybe he just wanted to experience what it would be like to walk down the aisle holding his own children. Some people just like to collect life experiences, I guess. He sees that Sarah is still an attractive woman and wants her, or maybe it's just a self-fulfilling ride. Being the selfish person that he is, he just flipped his charm switch and pursued until she gave in, just like I warned her she would. When things got serious, he chose to leave. For Peter, I'm afraid this was the most costly indulgence he's ever paid for. Before he could get home, several photos had appeared in his current wife's mailbox. She immediately invoked a prenuptial agreement to divorce him, and took over her father's company on her own, leaving him completely out of the picture. A week later, someone found a battered Peter in some remote alley. Rumor had it that it was the handiwork of his father-in-law, an old man who had always loved his only daughter and never tolerated such scum. By the time people at the wedding finally realized that Peter had left without saying goodbye, the kindly pastor had rescheduled the wedding for 6 p.m. I don't know at what point Sarah realized that something was wrong with her gown. All the seams had been deliberately damaged, and the gown was destined to fall apart like our marriage. Sarah and Amy kept trying to reach me. My voicemail was stuffed with their pleading messages, but that bridge of trust had collapsed. Unsurprisingly, Sarah left a lengthy voice message claiming that she had only gone in to talk to Peter after dropping him off back at the motel, and that the condoms in her bag were nothing more than a novelty item that she had casually purchased at the front desk. In the face of her simple "I'm sorry, I just asked her not to contact me again, so that we can keep some of the good memories left," she basically honored the request, only sending occasional messages of good luck. According to her family, she has had trouble getting out of the relationship and remains alone. In the divorce settlement, I asked for the bare minimum, which she accepted without hesitation. I moved into my youngest son's house for the time being and stashed the car in his garage. Seeing my pain, both sons refused to answer their stepmother's phone calls. Amy's fiancé found me later. I agreed to meet this young man because I admired him as a person. He told me that Amy had actually been trying to her mother from going to the appointment, but that Peter's magic was just too strong. We still keep in touch occasionally, but the conversation is always careful to avoid the hurt. It is said that the relationship between mother and daughter has been strained after this incident. I never knew if Amy blamed her mother for leaving her without two fathers, or if her new husband intentionally alienated his mother-in-law. Maybe someday I will forgive them. My sons have chosen to let go, and Amy's husband has been urging me to let go. If the hurt wasn't still so fresh, my heart might have broken over the wedding day scene. Amy walking down the aisle of the church alone, a tired Sarah sitting in the front row, tears smudging her carefully prepared makeup. The groom later said he couldn't even remember if there was one or two empty seats next to Sarah. But honestly, those details don't matter that much to me anymore. During the time the wedding was rescheduled, the groom's attitude clearly affected Amy's perception of what her mother was doing. He thinks it might instead be a good thing if the bride witnesses the consequences of the betrayal and remembers them, focusing on rearranging the details of the wedding. However, rumors continue to swirl. Sarah left the wedding reception after less than half an hour, overwhelmed by the reproachful glances, both explicit and implicit, from the guests. To this day, I often wonder if she regrets losing me and completely ruining her daughter's big moment. My heart still aches whenever I think back to this past. 20 years of living together fall apart in a betrayal. All those once warm memories are now clouded over. But I've come to realize that some broken things can't be repaired, and instead of clinging to the past, I'd rather be brave enough to embrace a new life. I just didn't know then that fate had a surprise in store for me. During those darkest days, I struggled with the pain for months like anyone who has experienced betrayal. I was totally committed to my work, trying to numb myself with the busyness, but still waking up late at night when I was alone with those unpleasant memories. I began to wonder if I would ever be able to trust a woman again, if I would ever have the courage to start a relationship again. Fate always likes to play jokes at the most unexpected moments. In the 12th month after my divorce, my oldest son Richard told me he was getting married. As a father, of course I had to be involved in the wedding preparations. That's when I met Isabella. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and I arrived early at the restaurant I had booked to discuss the wedding details with my kids. The moment I pushed the door open, I saw an elegant lady sitting on the window seat. The sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows onto her short silver-gray hair, weaving a soft halo around her. She tilted her head slightly sideways, intently flipping through a wedding planning magazine. "You must be Richard's father." She looked up with a warm smile. "I'm Linda's mother, Isabella." It was such a simple scene, such a normal greeting, but it made my heart skip a beat. It was a special feeling, like feeling the temperature of spring for the first time after a long cold winter. Our conversations unfolded naturally, from the kids' wedding plans to their respective jobs to life experiences. Isabella is also a single mother whose husband passed away 5 years ago due to illness. We've all experienced the end of a marriage, just in different ways. Perhaps it is this shared experience that allows us to understand each other's feelings so well. "You know what?" she said softly, "sometimes a loss is a gain. We wouldn't be sitting here today if it weren't for our respective experiences." Her words reminded me of an old proverb, when God closes a door, He always opens a window for you. And Isabella was like the window that let the sunshine back into my life. Our relationship grew quickly, yet was not at all abrupt. For short weeks later, I moved into Isabella's house. The decision came so naturally, as if we had known each other all our lives. I was touched by the warmth of her children's welcome, especially when her daughter Emma, the girl who always had a gentle smile, suddenly asked me one day if I could hold her hand down the aisle at her wedding. The request reminded me of Amy, but this time it felt completely different. There is no pain, no resentment, just relief from the past and anticipation for the future. I knew that I had finally and truly let go. Isabella is an amazing woman. She taught me that trust is not given blindly, but slowly built on mutual understanding and respect. She always said, "Real love doesn't need to be sensational. As long as there is true love in the plainness, that's enough." We would plant flowers together in the backyard, work on new recipes in the kitchen, and watch the stars from the balcony. These ordinary routines have made me feel happier than I have ever felt before. I found myself beginning to look forward to every morning because I could see her sleepy eyes, and every dusk because I could listen to her recount the day's insights. This morning, Emma's fiancé joked that the goofy grin on my face is on the verge of becoming my trademark expression. I smile and admit that this happiness came so suddenly that I sometimes worry that I'm dreaming. "Don't worry." Isabella held my hand and said, "This is not a dream. It's a reward from God after we've worked hard." In retrospect, that painful experience has instead made me appreciate the happiness in front of me even more. Like Isabella said, some things happen for a reason. If it wasn't for Sarah's betrayal, I might never have met Isabella. If it wasn't for those dark days, I might never have known I could believe in love again. Emma's wedding is scheduled for next month, and I'm already working on the father's speech. Yes, I said father's address. Because in this newly formed family, I am not an outsider, but a genuinely accepted member. When I told Isabella the first was thinking about the content of my speech, she just smiled and said, "Just say what you feel, because honest words move the most." Sometimes I think that this is probably a joke that fate has played on me. It cost me everything when I was at my most desperate, and it gave me a fresh start when I thought there was no hope left in life. Now I am no longer the man crushed by betrayal, but a man who knows how to cherish and love. Watching Isabella's busy figure in the sunshine, I knew I had found my true soulmate. Not the kind of passionate love at first sight, but the kind that fits together. We've all been through the storms of life, so we know better how to guard our hard-won happiness. Thinking about what? Isabella's voice pulls me back to reality. Thinking about our story, I said, "That's a good story." She leaned over my shoulder, "And the best part is yet to come." Yes, the best part is yet to come. Because some people are destined to experience loss before they can meet the one who truly understands them. And I, finally, waited for the one who made my heart beat again. My story, it continues. But this time, it's a new chapter with the right person. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.